Right now, while you're sitting there watching this, your body is doing things so strange that if a science fiction writer put them in a movie, you'd say it was too unrealistic. Today we're going through 5 facts about your own body that sound completely made up, but are backed by real biology. We're talking about a body that rebuilds itself piece by piece without asking permission, a second brain you didn't know you had, a plumbing system long enough to circle the planet, an organ that outperforms supercomputers on the power of a light bulb, and a molecule inside you long enough to reach the sun hundreds of times over. Some of these numbers are so large they barely make sense as numbers at all, so we'll do our best to translate them into something your brain can actually picture. By the end of this video, you'll never look at yourself in the mirror the same way again. Let's get into it. Fact number 1. You are not the same physical person you were 10 years ago, not metaphorically, literally. Almost every cell in your body is replaced on a regular cycle, and some parts of you are rebuilt so often that the you sitting here today is, atom for atom, a mostly different object than the child in your old photographs. Your skin, the largest organ you have, replaces itself roughly every 2 to 4 weeks. The outer layer is constantly flaking off, invisibly, all day, every day, and new cells are pushed up from underneath to replace it. That dust that collects on your shelves. A surprising amount of household dust really is made of shed human skin cells, from you and everyone who's ever lived in that room. Your gut lining is even faster. The cells lining your stomach and intestines are exposed to harsh acid and digestive enzymes strong enough to break down food, so your body replaces that entire lining every 3 to 5 days. If it didn't, your own digestive system would start digesting you. Your red blood cells last about 4 months before your body breaks them down and builds new ones, which means every few months you effectively have an almost entirely new bloodstream flowing through your veins. Even your bones, which feel permanent and solid, are being quietly dismantled and rebuilt by specialized cells your whole life. Cells called osteoclasts dissolve old bone tissue piece by piece, and cells called osteoblasts build fresh new bone in its place. This process is called bone remodeling, and it means your skeleton today is not the same skeleton you had a decade ago. Estimates suggest your entire skeleton is fully replaced roughly once every 10 years. Scientists actually figured a lot of this out using a clever trick involving nuclear bomb testing from the 1950s and 60s, which released a burst of a carbon isotope into the atmosphere. That isotope got absorbed into plants, then into food, then into the DNA of every new cell built afterward, acting like a tiny timestamp. By measuring how much of that isotope is in a given cell today, researchers can estimate almost exactly how old that cell is, and that's how we know your fat cells turn over roughly once every 8 years, while the cells lining your intestines might be younger than the coffee you drank this morning. There are a few important exceptions to all this rebuilding. The neurons in most regions of your brain, the lens of your eye, and the enamel on your teeth are largely with you for life, which is exactly why brain injuries and cavities don't just heal themselves the way a cut on your skin does. Heart muscle cells are also mostly locked in early in life, which is part of why serious heart damage doesn't repair itself well. Your hair and nails follow their own clocks too. Fingernails grow about 3 millimeters a month on average, slightly faster on your dominant hand, while your taste buds, the sensors that let you enjoy food in the first place, replace themselves roughly every 1 to 2 weeks, which is one reason a burned tongue recovers its sense of taste so quickly. But for the vast majority of your body, you are less like a fixed statue and more like a river. The water is always moving, always being replaced, molecule by molecule, but the shape of the river stays roughly the same, which is a strange thing to sit with the next time you look at an old photo of yourself. Fact number 2. You have a second brain, and it lives in your gut. It's called the enteric nervous system, and it contains somewhere around 500 million neurons, which is more neurons than you'll find in your entire spinal cord, and roughly the same number of neurons found in the whole brain of a cat. This network is embedded in the walls of your esophagus, stomach, and intestines, woven through the muscle layers like a mesh, and it's sophisticated enough to control digestion almost entirely on its own, without step-by-step instructions from your actual brain. You could, in theory, sever the connection between your brain and your gut would keep coordinating the complex, rhythmic muscle contractions needed to move food through your digestive system, a process called peristalsis. That's how independent it is. The scientist most associated with popularizing this idea, Dr. Michael, literally wrote a book called The Second Brain after decades of research showing just how much of your nervous system is quietly running the show down there, separate from conscious thought. But the most surprising part is the chemistry. About 90% of your body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter most associated with mood, happiness, and emotional regulation, is produced not in your brain, but in your gut. Your intestines are also a major production site for dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to motivation and reward, and other prominent research is now connecting the trillions of bacteria living in your gut, your microbiome, to that same chemical production line. In fact, your body contains roughly as many bacterial cells as it does human cells, and a large portion of them live in your digestive tract, quietly influencing everything from your immune system to your appetite too. According to a growing body of research, even your mood and stress levels. This is part of why your gut and your brain are in constant two-way communication through what scientists call the gut-brain axis, running largely through a massive nerve called the vagus nerve, which carries signals in both directions. It's a big part of why stress can give you a stomach ache before a big event, and why an unhealthy gut has been linked in research to anxiety and low mood. Researchers have even studied fecal microbiota transplants, transferring gut bacteria from a healthy donor into a patient, and found that a person's mood and behavior can shift along with their new gut community, which is a strange thing to sit with. All told, the bacteria living in your gut collectively weigh somewhere between 1 and 2 kilograms, roughly the weight of your brain itself, and how babies acquire that starter colony of bacteria, whether through a vaginal birth or a cesarean section, appears to shape gut health for years afterward. The next time you feel a gut instinct about something, or butterflies in your stomach before walking into a room, that's not just a figure of speech. That's your second brain, quite literally talking to your first one. Fact number 3. Laid end to end, the blood vessels inside your body would stretch for about 60,000 miles, which is roughly 100,000 kilometers. To put that in perspective, the circumference of the Earth is about 25,000 miles. That means the network of arteries, veins, and capillaries packed inside your body, most of it invisible to the naked eye, is long enough to wrap around the entire planet almost 2.5 times. It's even long enough that if you straightened it into a single line pointed at the sky, it would reach the moon and get roughly a quarter of the way back. Most of that staggering length isn't in your major arteries and veins, the ones you could actually see and feel pulsing under your skin, but in your capillaries, vessels so thin that red blood cells often have to squeeze through them one at a time, in single file, bending and folding just to fit. You have an estimated 10 billion of these microscopic capillaries, forming a delivery network that reaches almost every single living cell in your body, supplying oxygen and nutrients and hauling away waste products, all at a scale far too small to see without a microscope. And your heart pushes blood through this entire sprawling network nonstop, without ever taking a break, without you ever having to think about it or remind it, for every single second of your entire life. An average heart beats around 100,000 times a day, pumping roughly 2,000 gallons, or about 7,500 liters, of blood through your body every single day, using a total blood supply of only around 5 liters that just keeps circulating over and over. Over an 80-year, that adds up to roughly 3 billion heartbeats, moving blood through a plumbing system long enough to circle the Earth more than twice, all packed into a body that's maybe 6 feet tall at most, and powered by an organ roughly the size of your fist. Your lungs are built on the same theme of hidden surface area. If you flattened out all the tiny air sacs inside your lungs, called alveoli, they would cover a surface area of roughly 70 square meters, close to the size of an entire tennis court, all folded up and crammed inside your chest so that oxygen can move into your bloodstream as efficiently as possible. It's one of the most extreme feats of biological engineering that exists, and it's happening inside you right now silently as you watch this video. Fact number 4. Your brain is the most energy-hungry organ you own by a massive margin. It makes up only about 2% of your total body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your entire body's energy budget, even when you're doing something as simple as lying still and staring at the ceiling. That's about 10 times more energy, proportionally, than almost any other organ requires to keep running. In raw numbers, your brain burns through roughly 120 grams of glucose every single day just to keep functioning. And in early childhood, when the brain is growing rapidly and wiring itself up, that number can spike to as much as half of the body's entire energy budget, which is part of why young children need so much food and sleep relative to their tiny size. Where does all that adult energy go? Mostly into maintaining the electrical signals your neurons use to communicate. Your brain contains somewhere around 86 billion neurons, and each one is constantly managing tiny electrical and chemical gradients across its cell membrane, firing signals to other neurons thousands of times per second, across an estimated 100 trillion connections. Keeping that entire electrochemical system charged and ready is expensive, biologically speaking, and your body prioritizes it heavily, even during starvation. When your body is critically short on energy, it will break down muscle and fat tissue to keep the brain supplied with glucose, because losing brain function is far more dangerous to long-term survival than losing muscle mass. Here's a comparison that puts it all in perspective. Your entire brain runs on roughly 20 watts of power, about the same as a dim incandescent light bulb. Yet it can do things that supercomputers using megawatts of electricity, tens of thousands of times more power, still struggle to match, like recognizing a face in a crowd instantly or understanding a joke. This is also part of why mental effort can feel so exhausting. Intense concentration, studying, or difficult problem-solving genuinely does burn measurably more energy than a wandering, resting mind, even though you're not moving a muscle. And during sleep, your brain isn't just resting. It activates a cleanup system called the system that flushes out metabolic waste built up during the day, which is one reason poor sleep leaves you feeling mentally foggy. To really appreciate how efficient that is, consider that training a single large modern artificial intelligence model can consume several megawatts of electricity sustained over weeks, enough to power thousands of homes, just to approximate a fraction of what your 20-watt brain does automatically, continuously, while also keeping your heart beating and your lungs breathing at the same time. Your brain also consumes about 20% of the oxygen you breathe in, again, despite being only about 2% of your body weight, which is why even a few minutes without oxygen can cause serious brain damage, while the rest of your body can often tolerate far more. Your brain, sitting quietly inside your skull, using roughly the same amount of power as a dim light bulb, is by far the most demanding, most expensive, and most efficient piece of biological machinery in your entire body. Fact number 5, and this is the one that tends to break people's brains a little. Every single cell in your body, except your red blood cells, contains a complete copy of your DNA, coiled up incredibly tightly inside a nucleus far too small to see with the naked eye. If you could take just one of those DNA molecules and stretch it out in a straight line, it would be about 2 meters long, taller than most humans, despite being packed into a space thousands of times smaller than the width of a human hair. Now here's the part that sounds impossible. The average adult human body contains somewhere around 37 trillion